Hey YouTube, this is a Sphincter.
Alright!
Hey everybody, at the end of my MIDI remastering tutorial, I said I would do a tutorial on the compressor, and I've been putting it off for a few reasons. One was that my grasp on the compressor was tenuous at best. If you're like me, see, I do everything with my ears. My ears have the final say on what I do with my music. So when I first played around with the compressor, it looked like this. I was like, alright, here's the compressor, let's see what it does. And I said, oh great, it does nothing. I can't hear a goddamn thing that it does differently. So it took me a little while of playing around with it. At first I thought it was just this complicated volume effect that really didn't do much. But after exploring a bit with it, it started to make a good deal of sense. And it's a great way for you to kind of fatten up a sound, or it's also a good way to keep certain unruly sounds in check. If you've got like a vocal track that has a lot of high-pitched sounds that come through, or maybe you've got a track where at certain parts, the bass just gets a little too loud, gets out of control, and what you want to do is keep that bass level constant throughout your piece. The compressor, that's what it does. In a nutshell, I like to think of the compressor as that librarian, the one that always says, shut up, you're being too loud. And if the library gets a little bit too loud, if it gets over this threshold of hearing, she'll come over and smack your sound around and tell it to be quiet. The thing is, this librarian can come to your table like 60 or 44,000 times a second. So the comparison kind of ends there. But it's like this. Somebody's listening to this track. The compressor is listening to our music, and it's checking the volume all the time. And as soon as the volume gets above this level, what it does is it cuts it. And the ratio right here will tell us how much it cuts it by. If it's at 2-to-1, for example, if our sound is 10 decibels over the threshold, it's going to cut it to where it's 5 decibels over the threshold. Alright? If it's at 4-to-1, and we have a sound that's 20 decibels over the threshold, it's going to cut it down to 5 decibels over the threshold. It's a very simple dividing process. And at 16, obviously, you need a calculator. But that's the idea here. Our sound is still going to be above the threshold. It's still going to be louder than whatever we set here. And unfortunately, this one, this compressor sucks. Let's take a look at the M class. Same knobs, give or take 2. But this is cool because the threshold actually tells us in dB. So, for example, if I've got this set for -20, and a sound comes through that's at -30, it's going to say, all right, hey, that's 10 decibels above. You got to cut that down by 14.8% or infinity, and you can get pretty much any number that you want here. It's going to divide our output volume, or it's going to divide the difference between our output volume and the threshold by this ratio. Is that confusing enough? Alright, it'll make more sense when you see this gain level doing its magic. At 1-to-1 compression, there's nothing, no effect. So 10 decibels above go in, 10 decibels above come out. Let's listen to it again. Now I'm going to crank the ratio up. Let's watch this gain meter as I play with the threshold. When the threshold's all the way up, it's like the librarian is 90 years old. She's lost her hearing 20 years ago. She doesn't care. And there you could hear it. You could hear it right there. The threshold at its lowest setting, she can hear a pin drop. And basically every sound that comes through, she's going to have some say on how loud it's going to be. Now let's check out the ratio. No compression. At 2-to-1, it's a very subtle effect. It's just kind of capping off our loud spikes. At 4-to-1, it's a little more pronounced. This gain meter here will tell you what it's doing. If it's got no lit up bars, it means nothing's coming through compressed. It's not doing any reduction. This will tell us how much the sound is being reduced at a given moment. Okay, so if we see sort of spikes all the way up to the 14 decibel range, I know I'm getting some spikes where it has to chop 14 decibels off of it to make it fit. That's what our compressor is doing. It's keeping our volume in check, and it'll do that as long as we have one set up. The attack is going to determine how quickly it comes in. This is, I guess, the distance between your table and the librarian. I should just forget about the librarian metaphor there, but it made sense to me. All right, so anyway, let's try and get a good setting here that sounds right. All right, I like that. What that does is it's a little bit hard to hear the difference, but the bass, the sort of lower bass frequencies get a bit boosted. And it's not because this does any frequency checking, it's just because the bass happens to be quieter. That's it. We also have some input gain and output gain settings. The output gain is just going to kind of give a boost to the end volume in case you cut it too far. But the input gain has a more, it will affect your threshold. It's actually going to add this many decibels to our input frequency, so that could cause every sound to go over the threshold, and you can manipulate this to your advantage to sort of flatten out the scope of your music, your dynamics. If I have time here, let me check here and see if I can show you something. Okay, I've made a combinator here running as an effects device. It looks pretty complicated. I just want to go over it very quickly. My Dr. Rex here has output going into the combinator. It gets routed to a splitter, which splits it 4 ways. Each one of those 4 ways is sent to a vocoder, which looks just like this. 4 bands, and it's running in EQ mode. And notice that each vocoder has a different frequency band selected. So effectively what this does, it's a 4-band frequency splitter, and each frequency gets its own level of compression. This doesn't take up a lot of CPU. In fact, it's a very common thing to see in mastering. I think even certain companies manufacture hardware 4-band compressors, and you can actually download one of these combinator patches from the Reason website, but they don't take long to make. If you copy and paste your device once you've got it configured, you can put one together in like a minute. Anyway, this is a much better way to compress, and it'll give us a very good example of how you can round out your sound using compression. I'm only going to play with the ratios here. Now let's listen. Sorry, this is the original. And now let's compress. Mid-range compression does a lot. Okay, I know this was a bit confusing, and I don't have time to really go that much into detail, but I think that's the best I can explain the compressor. It's a bit strange. It's very subtle, and you really have to play with it to know what it's doing. Like I said, it's just there to keep your volume levels in check, but you can use that to your advantage in a number of ways. And a compressor has become really a staple of modern electronic music production. It produces a sound that has a certain amount of polish, for lack of a better word. Anyway, try it yourself. Don't be afraid of the compressor. I was for a while, but once I kind of got my feet wet and played around and started to understand what the knobs do, they started to make a lot more sense, and you can really use it to fatten up your sound. Hey, Spinkter out. Give me some feedback. Let me know what I can touch up on. if I didn't explain things all the way through. Thanks.